Hi, my name's Ben and I'm a data engineer at Quintessence. Today we're going to be looking at reports, but specifically reports with dynamic variables. So if I go to the report screen and I open the previous report we looked at, the Portfolio 1 return report, I can edit it and we can remember again that here we have returns that are calculated from the market value and then sorted descending. And in this case it's for just the 1st and the 2nd of March for Portfolio 1. We might want to change these to be dynamic variables so that we can see for any portfolio for any selection of dates. So I go to the report screen and I'm going to add 3 parameters. The first one's going to be called portfolio and I'm going to leave that as type text. Second one's going to be called start and I'm going to change that type to date. The third one's going to be called end and I'm going to change that type to date as well. So if I go to my configuration now, I can replace scenarios where I've used hard-coded portfolio references and change it to the portfolio variable. That's what I'm going to do. We can see the portfolio variables available on the left, so we can type it in on the right. Similarly for start and end date, I'm going to replace those with start and end. Now, when I put in test parameters inside the left block over here, so for example, here I'm going to go the 1st of September as the end date and the 1st of March as the start date. And when I double click on raw data and I hit execute selected, I will see all of my data coming back, obviously in many columns. And there's some examples where I've actually got some blank data because this particular stock wasn't in this portfolio until later on in the date range. There are also going to be some examples where the stock was in the portfolio, but then later on in the date range, it's no longer in the portfolio. And we'll see this create some data anomalies. So when I calculate the return, the first thing I'm going to notice is we don't want to reference C2 and C3 because those are the first 2 dates in the range. We want to reference the first date in the range and the last date in the range. So we can change C3 to C open bracket columns. And C open bracket columns will reference the last column of the data. This columns word is a special word in the transform that tells you how many columns are in this data, and so C of columns is the final column. Now when I hit execute, my sorting works, but we've got blanks in cases where the stock maybe wasn't initially in the portfolio and then becomes in the portfolio. We've got ones where the stock was in the portfolio but isn't anymore, or something like that. So we actually want to filter these out. So we can add one more variable that filters all of this data so that we get only the returns that are important to us. So I'm going to call this final variable final colon equals filter data is the function we want to use. We're filtering the result and we're going to say we want to filter out wherever it's equal to blank or where it's equal to 1. And this is column 2. So we can start by saying or C2 equals blank. So that's going to be 2 commas, semicolons. And then we can say C2 equals 1. We also don't want that. Now this will give me just those lines. So I'm going to wrap this around a knot. And that should give me the answer that I'm interested in. When I click execute, we see we don't get any ones. We don't get any blanks. We just get raw numbers that represent returns of those different instruments. So I can save my portfolio now. And we're going to move to Excel and we'll see something slightly different there in how we call this report. So if I go to Excel, I've set up a sheet. We've actually got some inputs and these inputs we can just reference when we call the report. So we say equals report and we need to remember what was the name of our particular report. It's portfolio 1 return. So we can type in portfolio 1 return. And then we can look on this FX button what the next arguments are. There's a headers argument. This isn't something we use anymore. And there's argument 1. So the first argument we put in was portfolio. So we can click on C2 and that'll reference portfolio. Argument 2 was a start date. So we can click on C3. That was our start date. Argument 3 was an end date. So we can click on C4 to get our end date back. And if we click OK, we get back the exact data we're expecting. If we change our start and end date, our data is also going to change. So if I change this to June, we'll get a different set of data. And this is a very powerful way to create dynamic dashboards in Excel that are pointing towards Quintessence Reports. I hope this has been useful for you and that you'll be able to find a way to add value. And if you need any help, please let the Quintessence team know so that we can help you building your dynamic reports.